Okay, so this is Auburn Fanatics podcast with Vernon Speaks, and we're going to talk about Auburn versus Baylor. There's a lot of storylines going on with the Auburn football fan base and, a lot of moving parts in this offseason that we want to talk about. I want you guys to go ahead and subscribe to the Auburn Fanatics podcast, Vernon Speaks. Like the video, comment, and subscribe. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. So as we look at the outlook of Auburn 2025, a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of urgency with this program for Auburn. Auburn has not had a winning season since 2020, and that doesn't sit well with the Auburn fan base, as most of the Auburn fans who are, listening, or Auburn fans that are out there have not ever experienced this. Now, they've experienced, some high level of mediocrity with the 8-5s and the 7-5s, but never just straight up losing seasons for this consecutive amount of time. And there's a lot of urgency as this season approaches. Auburn has had a couple of great recruiting classes. Now you have a situation where the recruiting is slowed down. I mean, slowed down tremendously, actually losing players and not really gaining the type of players that the Auburn fan base feel comfortable that the program is moving in a positive direction. In a positive way, Auburn has actually gained the Nike brand, which could possibly be a good recruiting getter. And I mean, hell, it just is a better fit for the Tigers, especially in all sports, basketball, baseball, football. And we will dive into that in other videos. Auburn takes on Baylor. Auburn will have to travel to Baylor on a Friday night, Labor Day weekend. This is the first time that I can think of in a long time that Auburn would actually be facing a Power Four football team in their home stadium. Usually, a game like this for Auburn, they'll play in a neutral site, like in Dallas, or they might even play them in Atlanta, something like that. But this is going to be an actual on campus game for the Auburn Tigers taking on the Baylor Bears, who, in my opinion, I think Baylor has some high aspirations for this season. And a big shout out to the Baylor fans that may be visiting this particular football page, this football podcast. I think Baylor is a pretty proud fan base, and they should be. I mean, you talk about a situation 2024 8-5, although 2023 3-9, 2022 6-7, but in the fairly recent history of Baylor football, they have a Heisman Trophy winner in Robert Griffin III, similar to Cam Newton at Auburn, and they were Heisman Trophy winners in consecutive seasons. Cam Newton in 2010, Robert Griffin III in 2011, and both of those guys, not necessarily, storied NFL careers, but they had, relatively respectful time in the NFL. And, Cam Newton actually making it to a Super Bowl. And Robert Griffin III and Cam Newton, both with podcasts, both are sports analysts now, and are enjoying successful careers outside of college football. And that was done on that college football platform. Auburn versus Baylor, I think, is a perfect matchup to start out the year. I think both teams have aspirations to do things a little bit better than they have in the recent past. As a matter of fact, I think Baylor has some very high aspirations, and they have documented high aspirations, going into this season in the Big 12, to where, you know, they're in a conference that doesn't include Oklahoma and doesn't include Texas, but they do have some caveats at the beginning of the season that could really dictate how this season will go for them. One, they face the Auburn Tigers. The Auburn Tigers, although losing seasons for consecutive years, they have two great recruiting classes, and the output as far as quality of football really showed last season. In a couple of games, Auburn was, probably a miscue or a bad play call or just an act of God away from an 8-5 season last year, or maybe even a 9-4 season, and possibly a bowl matchup. That's why I caution the Baylor fan base to not take this Auburn team for granted, because you talk about Auburn with utilizing a lot of freshmen last year. A lot of freshmen were in key roles in last year's team, a team that probably should have beat Oklahoma, a team that probably had a chance against California, that probably should have beat Arkansas, that should have beat Vanderbilt. I'm not saying that Auburn should have beat Georgia or Alabama, but they had very strong showings at points, even in those games. But the big storyline for Baylor, I really like this team. I've been kind of watching this team ad nauseum, for the past few weeks, and I wouldn't say that they have a weak roster, because that's not fair. These guys were ranked number 40 in 2025 and ranked number 53 in 2024. And they've also had some great, some pretty good transfers that have contributed to helping Dave Aranda, who was a former defensive coordinator at LSU, formulate this team. I think the fan base at Baylor, if I may say this humbly, I don't know what Baylor fans think, but I would think that they're ready to see some traction with the Dave Aranda hire. And I think they probably want to see it this year. And I think they probably want to see it with the win against Auburn. You know, one thing about it, I do feel that looking at Baylor, this is a very blue collar football team. This is a football team that, although they don't have the storied recruits, they don't have like the ultra talent base on paper, but these guys play really hard and they compete on a very high level. I think they let the Colorado game get away from them last year. I think they had an opportunity against BYU. I think they played very well in that bowl game against LSU, to where this team feels like they can begin to compete with some of the high level football teams in the country. Luckily for them, they don't really have the meat as far as schedule goes, but they do have some tricky opponents early in the season, albeit one of them being Auburn and SMU, who has their starting quarterback coming back from a team that actually made the college football playoff. So if Baylor is going to push the envelope to winning the Big 12 and winning, making it to the college football playoff, which is a lot more doable now that the field has expanded, they're going to have to beat either one or the two of Auburn and SMU. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I think, Baylor has done a good job in the transfer portal. When I look at the skill position, you got Ashton Hawkins, a transfer from Texas State. Did pretty well at Texas State. I think he'll do good at Baylor. Cameron Josh, and I want you Baylor fans and Auburn fans to remember this name. This is a name that a guy that was a preferred walk-on. He wears number 34. He doesn't particularly look like the guy that's going to be a dynamic receiver, but somehow, some way, he does well. He performs well, and he does it in the big games. And I think Auburn is going to be very well served to limit this guy's catches and yards if they're going to have a chance in Baylor's home stadium to win this football game. Michael Trigg, tight end. I think he's a great football player. Sawyer Robinson, they think that this guy is a dark horse, not necessarily for Heisman, but to be one of the better quarterbacks in college football this season, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. He did well in a lot of games. He started to get his traction, especially late in the season. And he's somebody that, with some protection, can be very dangerous for the Auburn Tigers. And my favorite one. Okay, so here are my two favorite players from Baylor: Cameron Josh, number 34, looks like a running back playing wide receiver, but he makes it happen some kind of way. And Bryson Washington. Auburn absolutely has to conform at the line of scrimmage on defense, has to play very sound at the linebacker position, or this guy is going to find space. And he's done it a lot. I've seen it a lot in a lot of football games. And once he finds that space, he's kind of hard to catch. Very good running back, very good vision, very good at, you know, finding things in space. I mean, finding things in very limited space and then breaking out for touchdowns. So Baylor, with the newly revamped conference that doesn't include Texas or Oklahoma, have a legitimate aspiration to win that conference. And like I said before, a win over Auburn could excite that fan base. Anytime, there's just a stigma with a win over an SEC opponent, especially Auburn. Now, Auburn in recent years just really hasn't been what Auburn normally is. Very competitive, very, beating the teams that they're not supposed to beat, then losing to the teams that they're not supposed to lose to. But Auburn is a team to where if you win against them, it's a morale booster. Auburn's got a lot going on. Two great recruiting classes, Nike brand. I think Auburn will push the ball down the field against Baylor, which will be a huge advantage for Auburn. Just looking at video, Baylor does not contain particularly well, and they give a lot of big plays up. Guess who's Auburn's got? Auburn's got Eric Singleton from Georgia, Horatio Fields, who's a very good possession wide receiver and probably could break a few. And then you have the great Cam Coleman, who can stretch the ball down the field in a lot of ways. And then you got Malcolm Simmons, who made a lot of big plays in a lot of big games for Auburn last year. Then you got on the running side for Auburn, my favorite running back, you know, Demario Austin. If he can hold on to the football, might be one of the better running backs in the SEC. I think that's a danger that Baylor has to look out for. Now, I'm not going to do a prediction on the Auburn Baylor game tonight, but I just want to give both fan bases a kind of a litmus of what you're going to be looking at. You're going to be looking at a lot more physical Auburn team on the offensive line. You're probably going to be looking at a more sensible quarterback with Jackson Arnold. Now, don't get me wrong. I like Peyton Thorne. I just didn't think Peyton Thorne fit in the system. Peyton Thorne did a lot of great things for Auburn. Gave Auburn a lot of chances in games that, they probably should have lost. But Auburn fans were mostly irritated with Peyton Thorne, with the decision making, with the sacks, but it could have been a lot to do with the offensive line, could have been a lot to do with play calling. But I do feel that with the additions to the offensive line for Auburn and Jackson Arnold at quarterback, and with the wide receiver pieces that is there now, I think Auburn has the opportunity to really explode the offense in a way that they would like to. Um, I'm envisioning a situation where this could be best case scenario without telling my prediction. I'm really looking at Auburn being explosive in this game to start. Maybe similar to another Texas team that Auburn played against last year where they got up to a big lead. I'll let you look that up without telling the video. But I'm telling you guys, this is going to be a very exciting football game. It's going to be the main thing on Friday night prior to Labor Day. Fox is going to be covering the game, which I like because there won't be. I want to hear the Big 12 bias at the beginning of the game. I really do. I don't want to hear. I kind of want to break from the ESPN analysis in this game and let Auburn really play football. Let Baylor really play football. I think this thing is going to be super electric They say that that stadium can be very loud at night. Like I said, the fan base for Baylor is very passionate, and they have a lot of reason to be. They have a winning record overall in their history, and they compete at a high level. Let me know what you think about this video. Comment and subscribe to the Auburn Sports Fanatic podcast with Vernon Speak Sports. Like the video, comment, and subscribe. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.